The thing about trust is, it ages faster than milk, especially in a cul-de-sac where the sound of hedge trimmers covers every argument and gossip travels faster than the mail. Around here, people pretend their fences are white pickets instead of emotional barriers. I used to be one of them. Mrs. Allen Carter, PTA chemistry teacher, believer in honest marriages and balanced checkbooks. I even ironed pillowcases once. That's how far gone I was. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It started small, as these things do. Alan began using cologne that cost more than my entire skincare routine. He started referring to his job as the grind, as if being a pharmaceutical sales rep was equivalent to climbing Everest barefoot. And the gym became his temple. I'd find his sneakers perfectly aligned by the door, like soldiers waiting for orders. Every morning he'd leave early for a cardio session and return with that self-satisfied glow people get when they've been admired. Just taking care of myself, he'd say, flexing his arm a little too obviously. I'd smile and sip my coffee, wondering when self-care started involving shaving chest hair. By the second month of his new regime, he'd upgraded his wardrobe. The man who once thought cargo shorts were God's gift to humanity was suddenly allergic to polyester. Crisp shirts, tailored trousers, a gold watch that screamed midlife justification. I remember holding one of those new shirts fresh from the dryer, still warm, and thinking it looked like a stranger's clothes. It wasn't just the clothes, it was the language. He started saying things like networking energy and vibe check. The final straw was the day he called me bro. I wish I were joking. He laughed it off when I raised an eyebrow. Habit from the guise, he said. You know how we talk at work. No, I didn't. I knew how we talked when we still cared about each other's sentences. At first, I told myself it was harmless. A man having a midlife glow-up isn't illegal. It's even encouraged in our town, where men trade lawnmowers like trophies and measure self-worth by golf memberships. Still, something gnawed at the corners of my patience. He was traveling more often, medical conferences in different states every other week. His suitcase lived on the guest bed now, half-packed at all times. He'd hum while folding shirts, rehearse lines in the shower, mumbling schedules like a high school actor learning lies instead of dialogue. Need me to proofread your presentation? I'd ask casually. Nah, company property, he'd say, shutting the laptop like it contained national secrets. We used to share everything, passwords, bank accounts, even a toothbrush once when we forgot to pack an extra on vacation. Now he guarded his phone like it was made of uranium. I ignored it longer than I should have. Habit, maybe. Marriage teaches you to adapt to discomfort. You learn to step around it, like a loose floorboard you've promised to fix but never do. Then, one afternoon, my colleague Dana stopped by my classroom. She was scrolling on her phone. Her expression caught somewhere between concern and curiosity. The face people wear when they're about to ruin your peace but can't resist. Renata, she said, her voice low. I think I saw your husband's post. I looked up from grading lab reports. Post? She turned her screen toward me. There it was, Alan's Instagram story. Caption, grind never stops. It showed him in a hotel bathroom, holding his phone just below his chin, mirror spotless behind him. Same marble counter as the last time he traveled. At first glance, nothing alarming. But then, I noticed the corner of a purse sitting on the counter. Not mine. Sleek tan leather with a gold clasp. Designer. Definitely not my bargain bin tote from the teacher's discount rack. I zoomed in. 2 toothbrushes. Neither was mine. Something in me went unnaturally still. Not the storm people expect. No cinematic gasp. Just stillness. Like my brain stepped out of the room to process alone. I kept grading papers, checked my watch, went home, made dinner. the usual choreography of denial. But the image stayed burned behind my eyelids like a chemical reaction that refused to neutralize. That night, Alan called from his conference. He asked about my day. I told him I'd spilled vinegar on a lab coat. He laughed, told me to order takeout, and promised to bring me something cute from the airport. I said, sure, and watched the lies shimmer through the phone line. After hanging up, I went to the kitchen and stared at the bottle of lab vinegar I'd brought home earlier for a science fair demo. I unscrewed the lid and sniffed. Sharp, honest, cutting through every false word he'd spoken. On impulse, I poured some into his protein powder jar. It wasn't revenge, not yet, just an experiment in poetic justice. Then I sat at the counter, opened my laptop, and started digging. Alan wasn't tech-savvy, but he loved routine. His email passwords were variations of our anniversary date. 2 tries later, I was in. Receipts, itineraries, hotel confirmations. All there. Every conference aligned suspiciously well with weekends when his company didn't have any listed events. His loyalty points balance was impressive. Clearly, infidelity was a rewarding endeavor. I didn't cry. Instead, I scrolled through his photos, analyzing angles like a crime scene technician. Same lighting, same bathroom, different tie, different woman, no faces. He was careful, or thought he was. It's funny how being betrayed doesn't always feel like heartbreak. It feels like being handed bad data. You start testing every variable to see where the experiment went wrong. The next morning, I drove to work early. The sunrise painted the suburb gold, lawns shining with artificial dew. Our neighbor, Jennifer, waved while walking her poodle. She smiled too brightly. People in this neighborhood could sense cracks forming before you even heard them. Alan still traveling? She asked. Yep, I said, saving lives, one sales pitch at a time. She laughed politely. I could already picture her whispering about it later at yoga. At school, I taught covalent bonding while my mind replayed every half-truth Alan had told. When the bell rang, I sat alone, staring at the empty beakers on my desk. Chemistry made sense, equal exchange, measurable reaction. Marriage didn't. By evening, curiosity turned to calculation. I called the hotel listed on his confirmation, pitched my voice into efficient professional mode. Hi, this is Renata from Carter Pharmaceuticals, I said. Mr. Carter's assistant. I'd like to confirm a special order for his suite. The receptionist didn't question it. Of course, ma'am. What would you like to add? A romantic dinner for 2, I said. Charge it to the corporate card. I paused. Include a handwritten note. Desserts on me. The breakup's on you. The words rolled out like vapor escaping a sealed flask. Quiet, inevitable, irreversible. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair. My hands trembled, but not from nerves. From clarity. That night, Alan posted another story. A close-up of wine glasses, captioned, "Earned it." My stomach turned, but not from sorrow. From anticipation. I spent the next day in a calm fog, the kind you get before a thunderstorm. I taught my classes, smiled at students, ate lunch with colleagues. All the while, my mind ticked like a metronome. When I got home, his toothbrush was missing. Closet space looked thinner. The man had packed extra this time. The audacity almost impressed me. By Thursday, I had the receipt. The hotel's email arrived confirming a lavish room service charge, filet, champagne, strawberries, all billed to the corporate card. Attached, a digital note delivery confirmation. I couldn't help it. I laughed, not a bitter laugh, a scientist's laugh when the hypothesis proves true. Desserts on me, the breakups on you. The bill hit harder than the truth. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. Alan. What did you do? He hissed. No greeting, no pleasantries. Excuse me? You ordered that meal. You embarrassed me in front of... He caught himself. My colleague. Colleague, I repeated. That what we're calling her? "You're overreacting," he said, his voice slipping into the rehearsed calm of a salesman. "It was nothing, just dinner." "Nothing costs $400? Renata, can we talk about this like adults?" "Oh, we are. I'm just choosing to do it from the moral high ground," he groaned. "You ruined a harmless fling. You had no right." I hung up. He texted. Paragraphs of justification, sprinkled with half apologies and warnings about consequences. I ignored them. Instead, I emailed his regional manager, attaching the receipt and a polite note about misuse of corporate funds. By the time I finished, the sun had set. Streetlights flickered on, illuminating perfect lawns and perfect facades. Somewhere across town, Alan was scrambling to save his job, his image, his illusion. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted the quiet. The next morning, I woke to a different kind of silence, the good kind, the kind that hums with satisfaction. His company laptop sat on the table. I'd already reported it as lost per protocol. Efficiency was my love language now. When Alan returned 2 days later, suitcase in hand, he found his key no longer fit the lock. I watched from the upstairs window as he tried twice, then 3 times before realizing. He called my name, voice tight with disbelief. "Renata, let me in." I opened the curtain just enough for him to see me. His face, once so sure of itself, looked smaller under the porch light. "Your access has been revoked," I said through the glass. "Company policy." He stared at me, blinking as if I'd spoken another language. Then he turned, dragging his suitcase down the walkway. Jennifer's curtains twitched across the street. The gossip would bloom before sunrise. That night, I changed the locks officially, updated the Wi-Fi password, and made myself tea. The house felt bigger, lighter, not empty, just rearranged. As I sat there, steam rising from the cup, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet correction of data, a balanced equation. Alan thought he could rewrite our story with hotel selfies and hashtags. I simply adjusted the variables. I didn't need forgiveness. I needed precision. And for the first time in months, everything added up. People think the hardest part of betrayal is the moment you discover it. That sharp crack in your reality. The before and after line you can point to forever. They're wrong. The hardest part is the silence that follows, when you still have to live inside the same skin, drive the same streets, put on the same teacher voice, while your entire internal structure is quietly rearranging itself with a crowbar. Alan being locked out wasn't the ending of anything. It was just the first variable removed from an equation that was already collapsing. And equations don't just settle, they react. They release energy, sometimes explosive, sometimes beautifully controlled. I was going for controlled. The morning after he tried the door, he sent 9 texts in a row, then 12 more. By lunch, I had a paragraph that looked like a Hallmark card written by a man who'd been kicked in the ego instead of the heart. "We have to talk. This is a misunderstanding. You took things too far. Let me explain. You're overreacting. You sabotaged my reputation. I deserve a chance to fix this." Not once did the word sorry show up. I didn't respond. Not because I was being dramatic, but because silence is underrated. It forces the other person to hear their own sentences bounce back at them. Meanwhile, the neighborhood grapevine had gone radioactive. Jennifer's poodle walk turned into a slow-motion surveillance march. Tom from next door waved at me with the sympathy of someone who wasn't sure if I'd been cheated on, committed tax fraud, or burned the house down for insurance. In this suburb, scandal is always more fun than truth. At school, though, normalcy had to be performed. Teaching teenagers is good practice for emotional poker. If they smell weakness, you're toast. So I taught the periodic table like nothing in my life was decomposing. During 3rd period, Dana approached me again, phone in hand. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Define okay," I said, rearranging lab goggles. She hesitated. "Alan posted another story. Look." Against my better judgment, I looked. He was sitting in a sports bar somewhere, beer in hand, posting a black and white selfie with the caption, "You think you know someone." I snorted. "Ah, yes, the classic victim arc." "You're handling this disturbingly well," Dana said. "That's because I'm not handling it," I replied. "I'm documenting it." After school, I stopped by the hardware store and bought new locks. Again, not because I needed them, but because I enjoyed the symbolism. Control turned into a physical object, something I could hold, install, hear click into place. The next day, Alan escalated. Flowers arrived at the school office, red roses, because he was the type of man who thought women were all programmed to melt at florist cliches. The card read, "Let's be adults about this." I returned them to sender. I didn't even open the plastic. The secretary watched me like she was witnessing a live episode of a suburban reality show. That afternoon, the real crack in the facade appeared. Not from Alan, he was predictable, but from someone I hadn't expected. Heather Lang, the mistress, the purse in the mirror woman. She showed up at the school, in person. I was in my classroom, wiping dry erase marker off my hands, when she knocked lightly on the doorframe. Slim, glossy hair, expensive coat, eyes that looked both nervous and rehearsed. "Renata?" she asked in a voice dripping with sympathy she hadn't earned. "Depends who's asking," I said. She offered a weak smile. "I'm Heather. I think we should talk." I stared at her for a long second, mentally replaying her ID badge reflection in Alan's selfie. She smelled like fresh perfume and entitlement. "No," I said. She blinked. I just think there's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, there has," I agreed. "You misunderstood. You thought I was the quiet, clueless wife. That's on you." She looked offended because women like her love being exposed as villains only when they're the ones telling the story. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "You didn't," I replied. "Hurt is temporary. Consequences are the long game." Her face paled. "You contacted my employer." "Yes," I said, as if confirming a lunch order. "Your ethics policy seemed so clear. I assumed they'd want to know. You're going to ruin both our careers." "No," I corrected. "I'm going to ruin his career. You just parked in the wrong emotional driveway." She stared at me, stunned. I waited exactly 3 seconds, then turned back to organizing lab beakers. She left without another word. The scent of her perfume lingered like a memo that I had every reason to finish the job. That night, Alan called again. This time I answered. "What do you want?" I asked. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. His voice had that tight, controlled edge of someone who realizes the narrative has slipped away. "You lost your job yet?" I asked. Silence. Then, "They're doing an internal review." "Translation, you're toast," I said lightly. "You don't get it," he snapped. "You've made yourself look unstable." "No," I said calmly. "I've made myself look informed." "You think this makes you strong? You'll regret it." "I already regretted marrying you. The rest is just paperwork." He inhaled sharply. I hung up. Revenge isn't rage. Rage is loud and burns out fast. Revenge is clean, scientific, methodical. You don't fling acid, you measure droplets. That weekend, I watched the neighborhood shift. People avoided eye contact. Some showed forced sympathy. Some showed curiosity in the form of casserole. One brave soul asked if Alan was seeing someone new. I told her, only professionally. HR will confirm. By Sunday, I'd logged into his airline rewards and transferred his points to my account. Then I booked myself a weekend spa retreat under the name Mrs. No More Excuses. Not out of pettiness, out of poetic balance. He earned those points cheating. I spent them healing. That's math. The twist came Monday morning. Alan didn't show up at the house, but his sister did. Linda Carter, self-appointed morale marshal of the HOA. Clipboard personality, perpetual judgment face, The kind of woman who believed forgiveness was available only to people who played the role of victim correctly. She marched up the walkway like she was storming Normandy. I opened the door before she could stab it with her acrylic nails. "You need to stop," she said without greeting. "Good morning to you too," I replied. "You've embarrassed this family." "Oh, trust me," I said. "Your brother did that all by himself." She huffed. "Marriage is work. People make mistakes." I held up a hand. "Linda, if you're here to defend him, go home. If you're here to lecture me, I'll get you a podium so the neighbors can hear." She sputtered. "You're being spiteful." "No," I said. "Spite is small. This is strategic." That shut her up. She left in a storm of indignation, which I counted as cardio for the day. Later that afternoon, a notification pinged. Alan's company laptop had been locked remotely. He was officially under investigation. The quiet satisfaction that washed over me felt like the lab moment when the solution turns the perfect color. You don't cheer, you just nod. Yes, that's the reaction we wanted. That evening, I checked the mailbox. A white envelope sat inside, no return address. Inside, a bill from the hotel listing every item from the room service feast I gifted him. A handwritten note at the bottom, in Alan's handwriting. "You went nuclear." I smiled. He was wrong. Nuclear is uncontrolled, destructive, irreversible. What I was doing, precision. And precision takes time. It struck me then. This wasn't a story about heartbreak. This was the origin story of someone who finally stopped making excuses for someone else's mess. Alan thought I'd collapse. He thought he'd walk back in with a sad face and a half apology, and I'd patch the drywall and the marriage and pretend the house wasn't already hollow. Instead, I tightened every bolt, rewired every outlet, labeled every switch in the breaker box, emotionally speaking. Because the next phase wasn't about finding closure. It was about making sure every exit he once had was sealed. He ruined the marriage. I was just finishing the paperwork with style. And as far as equations go, I was finally balancing mine. There's a moment, right after a building is condemned but before it's demolished, when it still looks almost livable. Windows intact, paint only slightly peeling, structure standing because it hasn't been tested by a storm yet. That's where Alan was, still convinced he could tape his life back together before anyone noticed the cracks. Meanwhile, I was already measuring where to place the final swing. Not rage, just architecture. On Tuesday, the HR department at his company sent me a polite confirmation email. "Thank you for notifying us. We are reviewing the matter. I didn't frame it, but I did reread it twice with the same satisfaction I get when titrating a solution and landing on the perfect endpoint." Alan, meanwhile, switched from texting to calling. Unknown numbers, burner apps. Once, he even used his mother's phone. I let it ring every time. I liked imagining him rehearsing explanations that would never be heard, but silence could only carry this performance so far. It was time for the second phase, action, not reaction. The spa weekend was booked. My name on the reservation, Mrs. No More Excuses. I smiled when the confirmation email came through. The loyalty points he earned sneaking around were now officially funding my skincare and robe-wrapped lounging. Balance in all forms matters. That night, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, spreadsheet glowing like a wall map. Flights, hotel records, expense reports, emails. Each tab labeled with the precision of someone who has stopped calling something an accident and started calling it what it is, a pattern. Alan had used the same hotel chain 6 times in 4 months. Same room preference, king bed, high floor, city view, same credit card, same predictable narcissism. He wasn't careful. He was careless in a way only men who believe they won't be questioned ever are. Midway through copying confirmation codes into a folder called Liability Fuel, my inbox pinged. Alan Carter has removed you from joint banking notifications. I laughed. Oh, honey, I said to the empty room. We're past notification removal. We're in asset redistribution season. My lawyer, a woman I found through a colleague who had recommended her with the whispering reverence usually reserved for surgeons, had already prepared the paperwork. Financial misconduct, misuse of marital funds, asset concealment, all perfectly legal leverage. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just effective. The next day, during my lunch break, I submitted the petition electronically, filed, stamped, logged. That's the thing about real revenge. Nobody ever warns you how satisfying bureaucracy can feel when you're the one using it as a scalpel. But the real execution, the kind that leaves an echo, required timing. And the next opportunity came courtesy of the school district. Open house night. The annual event where students drag their parents into classrooms to prove they haven't been living like goblins. Hallways filled with families, chatter, poster boards showing how chemistry was still relevant in the age of social media. Perfect audience. I set up my room, arranged beakers, straightened lab coats, smiled at parents. All very professional. But in the back of my mind, a small timer ticked. At 7:14 p.m., right as I was explaining ionic bonding to a dentist and his shy daughter, I saw him. Alan, in the doorway. Shirt too crisp, smile too forced, eyes darting like a man trying to spot the alarm panel before the cops arrive. He waited for me to finish talking, then approached with palms raised like he expected applause. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "No," I replied calmly. "You need to listen." He glanced around. "This is not the place." "It's perfect," I said. "Public space. Witnesses. No chance for you to rewrite the scene later." His jaw tensed. "You've made this hostile." I tilted my head. "Alan, the hostility started when you brought another woman's purse into a hotel bathroom and thought reflections didn't exist." A couple of parents paused nearby, pretending to read the periodic table poster while soaking in the live drama. One mother elbowed her husband so hard he almost dropped his coffee. Alan lowered his voice. "You're ruining my reputation." I smiled. "I didn't ruin it. I just emailed the footnotes." His expression flickered, the kind of flicker you see when someone realizes the fire they set has already jumped 3 houses over. "You're out of control," he hissed. "You're out of options," I replied, still calm, still smiling at the poster board behind him so the audience could pretend we were just 2 adults discussing glue sticks. He stepped closer. "We can fix this if you stop." "No," I said, "but thank you for proving how little you understand my vocabulary." He stared at me, completely still. Then he did the thing cheaters always do. He tried to flip the script. "You're going to regret this when the dust settles." I leaned in just enough for him to see the exact lack of fear in my eyes. "Alan, I don't regret revealing the truth. I regret not doing it sooner." He walked out. Not stormed. Walked. Slow. Like a man realizing the door he came through had vanished. 30 seconds later, 3 parents approached me with the same sentence in different tones. "Good for you." That was action scene number 1 of the week. The second happened 2 days later, at the hotel. Not the same hotel from the Selfie, the next one on his conference list. Alan was nothing if not predictable. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Instead, I called the front desk again. This time, not ordering food, but asking a simple question in my most polite professional voice. "Hi, I'm Alan Carter's assistant. He accidentally left sensitive company documents in the room last day. Any chance you still have the lost and found record?" They did, and the list was educational, tie clip, phone charger, woman's scarf. I didn't need the scarf. I needed the record, time-stamped, attached to his loyalty account. Proof that he was not only cheating, but using company funds to host it. Corporate investigation fuel level, maxed. That afternoon, I forwarded the document to his manager with another short note. In case the internal review requires supporting detail, Legal tone, chilly. Satisfaction level, steady simmer. That night, Alan texted me a photo of his box of desk belongings. Caption, "You happy now?" I stared at it. Box full of framed certificates, branded mugs, ego trinkets, all the things men like him think define them. I replied, almost, because the final stage wasn't career, or marriage, or image, it was narrative, and he still believed this was a fight he could debate his way out of. Which brought me to the third scene in this chapter, the parking lot. Friday evening, I was loading groceries when I heard the slam of a car door too close behind me. I turned. Alan. Same tense shoulders, same attempt at intimidation, like he'd studied dramatic entrances from television. "You blocked my card," he said. "Yes," I replied. "That tends to happen when the person funding it files for financial separation." He stepped forward. "You don't get to freeze me out of my own life." "I didn't freeze you out," I said. "You walked out. I just locked the door behind you." His face shifted, anger mixed with something closer to panic. It would have almost been sad if I hadn't known how many times he practiced lies in the shower while calling me bro. "You could have just talked to me," he tried. "I did," I said, "for months. You just weren't listening, because nobody was handing you consequences back then." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there are moments when even the most stubborn people feel the gravity of a situation they can't charm their way out of. "You really want this to end like this?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, "because this way it actually ends." He stepped back, exhaled, and for the first time, I saw it, the truth landing. The realization that I wasn't bluffing, wasn't stalling, wasn't waiting for an apology he'd never mean. He left. No final words, no attempt at sympathy, just a silent retreat to a shrinking world. I put the last grocery bag in my trunk and stood there for a moment, letting the calm settle. Not triumph, not relief, just the awareness of a door shutting firmly in the right direction. I drove home, made dinner, watered the plants, simple tasks, normal rhythm, because revenge isn't supposed to replace your life. It's supposed to remove whatever was draining it. Alan was gone, the lies were gone, the weight was gone, but the story wasn't over. Not yet. There was still one more layer, one more move, one final correction to the long equation of this marriage, because the best part of being a chemistry teacher isn't explaining reactions. It's knowing exactly which ones still haven't happened yet. And I had one left, one that would finish the formula, one that would make sure Alan never got to rewrite even a single footnote. Revenge may be patient, but it never forgets the last step. There's a stage in every unraveling where the person who caused the mess finally realizes the mess has weight. Not emotional weight, financial weight, social weight, the kind you can't charm through or jog off with a protein shake. Alan hit that stage the same week the company officially cut him loose. I didn't get a personal announcement, but I didn't need one. The signs were everywhere. First, the silence. Not the angry kind, the scrambling kind. The kind where a man who built his identity on title, paycheck, and points-based hotel upgrades suddenly has no access card, no corporate email, no audience for the speeches he spent half his life practicing. Then came the desperation. Not to fix things, but to rewrite them. Which is why, on a perfectly calm Wednesday afternoon, Alan showed up again. Not at school, not at my house. At the district parking lot, right after dismissal, when teachers are too tired to intervene and students are too focused on TikTok to notice a man about to stage a dramatic plea in khakis. He was leaning against his car, arms crossed, like the confident version of himself hadn't just been deflated like a sad parade balloon. He had that look, equal parts accusation and nostalgia, a man hoping familiarity might override accountability. "Renata," he said as I approached, "we need to stop this spiral." I unlocked my car door. "There's no spiral, Alan. I'm on a straight line. You're the one spinning." "I lost my job." He said it like a headline he assumed I hadn't already read. I know, I said. I filed the paperwork that helped it happen. He blinked, like the honesty was a personal insult. You cost me my career. No, I corrected, tossing my bag into the passenger seat. You cost yourself your career. I just forwarded receipts. You went nuclear. I went precise. Learn the difference. He let out a strained laugh, the kind that carried more panic than humor. You really think this makes you the winner? There are no winners, I said, just people who don't repeat the same mistake twice. Then came his attempt at softening, Alan's favorite fallback move. He lowered his voice. You're punishing both of us. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have lied. But this is extreme. I shut my car door but didn't start the engine. You want extreme. Extreme was me grading essays at midnight while you were sending mirror selfies to a woman who thought workplace badges counted as jewelry. He opened his mouth, searching for a comeback and finding none. That was new. Alan, the man who always had a line ready. He finally realized he was out of scripted versions of himself. You don't have to ruin my whole life, he said finally. I tilted my head. Alan, your life isn't ruined. It's just uninsulated. Big difference. He took a step toward the car window. Can we at least talk? Civilly. Maybe sit down somewhere. No, I said, because every time we've sat down in the past, I thought I was talking to a husband. Turns out I was talking to a hobbyist. He flinched like it stung, but I stayed calm. Being angry was exhausting. Being factual was efficient. I'm filing for separation, I added, already set in motion. His eyes widened. You're not serious. I've never been clearer. He stood there, stunned, like the paperwork I'd already submitted existed in a fictional world he assumed wouldn't affect his. Then he said the sentence that told me we were officially entering the next act. I won't let you take everything. I didn't laugh. I didn't roll my eyes. I just stared at him long enough to make the air feel like a courtroom. Alan, I said, I'm not taking everything. I'm taking what I'm owed, what you didn't protect, what you thought I wouldn't touch because I loved you more than I respected myself. He stepped back. I started the engine. Conversation over. He didn't follow me home that day, but someone else did. Heather. Again. Not in person this time, through email. A long, strangely poetic paragraph about 2 women caught in a storm, neither asked for. I skimmed it. Half apology, half self-preservation, all useless. She asked if we could meet woman to woman. I replied with one sentence. We already met. You didn't enjoy it. Blocked, filed away, done. But the real shift came 48 hours later, at the grocery store of all places. I was halfway through produce, comparing avocado textures, like a woman who had reclaimed control of at least one green thing in her life, when I heard a familiar voice say my name. Not Alan, worse in a different way. Linda, his sister. She stood beside her cart, hands on hips, expression radiating self-righteous fury. The kind of face only someone who has never apologized can achieve. We need to discuss what you're doing to my brother, she said. I grabbed a bag of apples. No, we don't. You're humiliating him. No, I'm exposing him. Humiliation is just the natural consequence. She leaned in. He's lost everything. Job, credit, reputation. I cut her off. And whose purse do you think helped carry that away? Her jaw shifted. You could have handled this privately. He could have cheated privately, I said, but he chose hotel mirrors and hashtags. A couple near the tomatoes pretended to read labels, while copying every word into their minds for future neighborhood distribution. That was fine. I didn't care who heard anymore. Truth has better legs than rumor if you feed it enough documentation. Linda exhaled dramatically. You didn't even give him a chance to explain. Oh, he explained, I said. He just didn't like that I kept the receipts. She huffed. You're being cruel. I'm being consistent, I replied. Something your brother never was. That was when it happened. Linda stepped too close, voice rising, and suddenly we were 2 feet from a public argument in front of an entire row of cucumbers. Which is exactly why I stopped speaking. I just raised a single eyebrow and let her unravel into the silence. Nothing terrifies loud people more than someone who won't amplify them. "I hope you're proud," she snapped, "because everyone sees who you really are now." "Great," I said. "I spent years being invisible." She stormed off, grocery cart squeaking like a wounded animal. Another free cardio session. That night, I got a notification from the bank. Alan had tried to move money from the joint account. The system flagged it because my attorney had already filed a freeze order. Paperwork, still undefeated. I made tea, opened the living room blinds, and watched the calm sunset. Another day, another small victory. But the equation still wasn't finished. There was one part left, the uncontrolled variable. Alan's ego. He'd lost his job, lost access to accounts, lost control of the narrative. But there was one area he still hadn't faced: the mistress fallout, the workplace scandal, the fact that Heather had gone from secret to liability, and neither of them knew how many internal emails I'd seen, so I helped the universe along. I forwarded the expense report screenshots, the room service receipt, and the HR badge reflection photo, this time not to a company, but to the woman's fiancé. Yes, fiancé. A man named Robert, whose social media page was one romantic caption away from proposing again. The email subject line: "You deserve the full story before you marry into it." No names, no insults, no commentary, just files. Attachments speak louder than curses. 10 minutes after I hit send, I felt no guilt, just balance. Actions have ripples. Cheating isn't private. It just stays quiet until someone opens a window. A day later, I watched the ripples hit shore. Heather showed up at school again, not near my classroom this time, but pacing the parking lot like she was waiting for the verdict to be spoken out loud. She looked pale, upset, phone in hand, mascara slightly smeared. She saw me, walked fast. I didn't speed up. "You had no right," she said. "You had no ring," I replied. He ended it with me. "You're welcome." She shook her head. "You're cruel. You ruin things and walk away like you're holy." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm not holy. I'm thorough." She stared at me, breathing hard, and for a second, I could see the quiet truth in her eyes. She never expected consequences. She thought she was the upgrade. She thought she could stand on broken vows without slipping. "He said you were cold," she said weakly, as if that accusation would injure me. I smiled. "He said a lot of things. None of them were trustworthy." She left, not dramatically, just deflated. Another subplot resolved itself without me lifting a finger. Now there was only Alan left. Not legally, he'd already lost. Emotionally, he still believed there was a way to walk back into the story and force a new ending. So I set the last step in motion. Not revenge through paperwork, not career, not gossip, physical presence, direct closure. I invited him over, not into the house, into the garage, neutral ground. One last confrontation before the locks, the court dates, and the lawyers made everything official. He arrived looking hopeful in that delusional way people do when they think the person they betrayed will eventually fold, because history means more than self-respect. We talked, or rather, he tried. I let him speak until his arguments ran out of oxygen. He listed excuses. I listed facts. He tried guilt. I tried silence. He tried charm. I tried accuracy. Then I gave him the real ending. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm finished." "You're ending us over one mistake?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm ending us because you thought it was only one." He stared at me, really stared, and finally saw the one thing he never expected: no love left to negotiate with. That was the moment the whole structure collapsed in his eyes. Not because I shouted, because I didn't. He left, not slamming the door, not swearing, not performing, just walking away like a man who suddenly realized every version of himself in this story had been retired. I didn't celebrate, didn't cry, didn't toast to freedom. I just stood in the garage and inhaled the quiet. Because sometimes revenge isn't explosive. It isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. Sometimes revenge is simply creating a world the person who betrayed you no longer belongs in, and closing the door. Revenge has a strange way of turning the volume up on everything you used to ignore. The neighbors' whispers got sharper. The HOA emails felt heavier. Even the grocery aisles seemed to hold tiny echoes of conversations with my name in them. It wasn't paranoia. It was suburbia doing what suburbia does best, turn private business into a communal buffet. And honestly, I let it happen. Gossip was free advertising. I just made sure the product was the truth. The week after Alan left the garage like a rejected applicant from his own life, the community started to split into factions. Some people, usually the ones who had never risked anything emotional beyond a discounted Target throw blanket, decided I was too harsh. Others, mostly women with quiet eyes and long memories, simply gave me a nod that said, finally, one of us didn't fold. Then there were the neutrals, the ones who pretended not to care but casually asked, "So, how are things?" With the subtle hunger of people who wanted a headline for their next brunch. I didn't give them one. I gave them facts. Facts have longer legs than drama and require less maintenance. That alone made them confused and irritated. But while suburbia was busy adjusting its gossip thermostat, I was moving into the final stage of the equation. Not legal, not financial, social. The kind of strategic reclamation that doesn't just end a marriage, it rewires a woman's orbit. Because people like Alan expect their absence to leave a void. They expect the wife to crumble, to turn into a cautionary tale with a broken garage door and emotional wilt. I had other plans. The first move was unintentional but effective. The school district sent an email announcing the annual charity auction, silent bidding, themed baskets, parents pretending they weren't silently competing with one another. I usually kept my involvement minimal, but this year I signed up to run the lab-themed donation table, on purpose. Visibility is a kind of revenge too. At the auction, I wore a dark green dress that looked like it belonged to someone whose life wasn't falling apart. That was the point. People expect devastation to show on your face. They don't know what to do when it doesn't. The event took place in the gym, folding tables lined up, white twinkle lights, the smell of catered appetizers trying too hard. Parents milled around, pretending not to notice which marriages looked strained, which families overspent on themed baskets, which couples arrived in separate cars. It was a quiet battlefield, and I was no longer walking into it unarmed. I was refilling pens for the bid sheets when I heard it. A voice I recognized instantly, the kind that thinks tone is personality. Linda, Alan's sister, again. She wasn't alone this time. She had her little circle, 3 PTA wives who lived in leggings and misquoted inspirational quotes. They stood 10 feet away, whispering with the body language of people who believed the room should be arranged around their judgment. I knew they wanted a reaction. So I smiled and gave them none. That's the thing about people who thrive on superiority. They wilt in silence. Eventually, Linda couldn't take it. She came over, hands clasped like she was auditioning for Graceful Martyr of the Year. "You're really putting on a show, aren't you?" she said in a low voice. "No show," I replied. "Just participating, like a normal adult." She gave a tight smile. "People are starting to feel uncomfortable with how public you've made all this." "People," I repeated, "or you?" Her face flickered. "You're not the victim here, Renata. You're acting like some kind of hero because you blew up your own marriage." I straightened a stack of bid cards. Correction. I exposed the truth. The explosion was already happening. I just stopped pretending it was thunder. Her jaw twitched. "You could have kept this quiet. Instead, you humiliated my brother, dragged everything out. And now you're, what, proud? I'm not proud, I said. I'm functional. Huge difference. That was when one of the PTA wives, the kind who smelled like vanilla candles and superiority, leaned in and said, "Some women just can't let things go." I raised an eyebrow. Some women can't mind their own lives. Silence. Tight, uncomfortable silence. Then the vanilla candle woman mumbled something about refreshments and retreated. Linda stayed long enough to glare, then followed her entourage, heels clicking like disappointed punctuation. A woman I barely knew, mother of one of my quieter students, walked over after they left. She didn't say much, just handed me a mini cupcake and murmured, "Nice aim," before walking away. I didn't know her name, but in that moment, she was my favorite person in the room. Phase 1, social disruption, complete. Phase 2 began the next morning, with a message from the school secretary. "You have a visitor in the office." I assumed it was a parent or a student who forgot a lunchbox. Instead, it was Alan. Again. He looked rough, shirt wrinkled, jaw stubbled, that tired, jittery look of a man who's been sleeping in borrowed places. "We need to talk," he said. "Funny," I replied, "because every time you say that, it's really a request for me to listen while you rearrange blame." He ran a hand through his hair. "You've turned everyone against me." "I haven't turned anyone," I said. "You revealed yourself. I just stopped covering the mirror." He exhaled sharply. "They're cutting my severance package. And I don't have income right now. I might need help." The audacity almost amused me. "You need help?" "Yes," he said, as if the word burned. "Short term, until I get back on my feet." "You had other feet," I said. "Expensive ones. Inexpensive shoes. That's not fair. Neither was the hotel suite." He leaned closer. "Renata, you're not this cold." "Oh, Alan," I said softly. "You just never saw me warm for myself instead of you." His expression hardened. "If you keep pushing, I'll fight the divorce terms." I smiled. "Good luck. The judge will enjoy the room service receipt." That was it. No more negotiations. No more, maybe she'll fold attempts. For the first time, he understood there was no way back in. Not to the house, not to the marriage, not even to the version of me he used to manipulate. He left without another word. No anger, no performance. Just an exit. That alone said everything. But there was still one final spark needed, not to hurt him, but to ensure the story ended exactly where I meant it to. It arrived in the form of an HOA meeting. Yes, the suburban coliseum where landscaping violations and holiday decor disputes turned into miniature civil wars. This month's meeting, attendance doubled. The gossip mill had clearly upgraded its machinery. Linda was there, of course, and so were the side eyes, the "is she really here" stares, the whispers thick enough to cut through. I sat in the center row, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, and completely uninterested in shrinking. Halfway through the agenda, right between fence repainting standards and approved mailbox colors, Linda raised her hand. "I think," she said sweetly, "that community conduct should matter, especially when someone's personal choices affect the neighborhood's reputation." Oh, she wanted to bait me, wanted me to snap, wanted me to turn into the unstable woman she could point at afterward. I didn't bite. I just sat forward and spoke without asking for the floor. "I agree," I said, "which is why I'm really glad nobody here used the HOA credit card for hotel rooms and strawberries." A few heads snapped toward her, a few mouths covered badly hidden smiles. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh, wow," the universal sound of suburban entertainment reaching premium channel status. Linda flushed, sputtered, and tried to recover. "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant," I said. "I just wanted to make sure everyone else did too." The meeting continued. I didn't look at her again. I didn't need to. The shift had already happened. The narrative was no longer hers to sculpt. It was mine. When I got home, I stood in the quiet kitchen and realized something. Revenge wasn't the story. It was the cleanup. The story was the rebuild. The fact that everything I'd done, every email, every receipt, every calm confrontation, wasn't spite. It was structure. Alan had chaos in his hands. I had blueprint paper in mine. He'd played games in mirrors. I'd played strategy in daylight. And now there was one last move left. The final action scene. The one where I stopped reacting to betrayal and started authoring the ending. It wasn't going to be in a boardroom, or a garage, or a grocery store. It was going to be face-to-face. Final. Controlled. A moment with no room for excuses. Because every long equation ends with one last line. And I was ready to write mine. The thing about endings is that people expect them to arrive quietly, like a book sliding shut or a movie fading to credits. Real endings don't do that. Real endings are messy, loud in the small ways, and always involve someone who still thinks the story can be rewritten if they just speak fast enough. Alan was that someone. And the final scene wasn't going to be symbolic or poetic. It was going to be factual, physical, and absolutely undeniable. Because I wasn't interested in closure. I was interested in finality. It started with the car. Not my car, his. The same shining silver sedan he loved more than he ever loved respecting a boundary. The one he vacuumed twice a week, polished, photographed, and referred to as my second office. That car was a shrine to the man he pretended to be. Polished, admired, expensive, admired again. So when I heard from a neighbor that Alan had been parking it in front of the old house at night, just sitting there, engine off, staring at the place he no longer had keys to, I knew the ending was warming up. People like Alan don't let go. They wait for weakness, and I wasn't going to give him any room to imagine one. Friday night, right after sunset, he showed up again. Except this time, he didn't just sit in his car. He got out, walked up the driveway, rang the doorbell 4 times in a row like someone who believed repetition could turn back time. I opened the door, but not all the way. "What do you want, Alan?" He looked exhausted, unshaven, the kind of worn-out a man gets when the world stops spinning around him. "We need to talk." "No," I said. "You need to hear. Talking is what you do when you still have leverage." He exhaled. "You're not even willing to have a conversation." "You didn't have conversations," I said. "You had cover stories." His jaw tightened. "Fine. Then hear me. I can't find a job. The investigation followed me. Employers are Googling me. I'm getting shut out of interviews." "So you finally discovered actions have consequences," I said. "Congratulations. That's personal growth." "I'm serious," he said, stepping closer. "You've put me in a corner." "No," I replied. "I just removed the walls you used to lean on." For a moment he didn't speak. Then something flickered behind his eyes. Frustration, panic, ego mixing into something sharp. He pointed toward the house. "I lived here. I paid for half this place. You can't just erase me." "I didn't erase you," I said. "You moved yourself into the margins." He stepped forward like he intended to push past me. That was his mistake. I shut the door in his face, locked it. He pounded on it. "You can't keep ignoring me." "Yes," I called through the wood. "I can. Lawyers love paperwork more than I do, and they're getting paid to do the rest." His pounding stopped. Silence. A silence I recognized, not the defeated kind, but the calculating kind. Then his voice. "I'll be back. This isn't over." "Yes," I said. "It is." He left the porch, but he didn't leave. That's how I knew the climax was coming. He didn't drive away. He sat in the car, engine off, lights off, the way a man waits for a chance he thinks will appear if he lingers long enough. What he didn't know was that I had already planned for this stage, not with panic, with preparation. The garage door opened, slowly, intentionally. I stepped out, calm, confident, holding a small, neatly packed box. his box. Not sentimental, just the last physical remnants of his existence in my house. Keys, chargers, one stray tie, a watch he forgot in the closet. The final inventory of a life that no longer lived here. I walked toward the car and set the box on the hood. He got out. "What is this?" "The last of your things," I said. "You won't need to come back." He stared at the box, then at me, then at the house like he expected it to argue on his behalf. "You can't do this," he said. "I already did, and I'm not asking for your approval." Then came his breaking point, his voice raised, his hands clenched, his anger desperate enough to pretend it was strength. "You ruined everything." "No," I said, steady as glass. "I revealed everything." That wasn't enough for him. He needed drama. He reached for the box, then hurled it to the ground, contents scattering across the driveway. The watch hit the pavement. The charger snapped. That was his swing, his final attempt to leave damage behind. What he didn't expect was retaliation. Physical, immediate, controlled. I walked past him, calm as if I were retrieving a dropped pen. I picked up the watch from the driveway, his prized watch, the one he polished, the one he used to flash in restaurant lighting like it was a personality trait. I held it up, looked at it, then let it fall again. Harder. The glass cracked. He stared at me, stunned. "What are you doing?" "Finishing," I said. Then I walked to his car, that polished second office shrine of self-importance. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small bottle of vinegar I'd taken from my classroom cabinet. 0 damage to paint, but absolute destruction to leather. I twisted the cap. He moved toward me fast. "Don't you dare." I poured it across the open driver's seat in one slow, unapologetic line. The smell hit instantly. Permanent. That seat would carry the scent longer than any apology he could manufacture. "Congratulations," I said. "You finally get residue that won't scrub off." He froze, disgust and shock flashing across his face. "That's immature." "No," I said. "That's physical. You've already had emotional, legal, financial. This is the final set." He looked like he wanted to scream, but nothing came out. He had no lines left, no stories left, no audience left, and then the true ending appeared. Not dramatic, not scripted, just real. Headlights from a neighbor's car turning into the cul-de-sac. Witnesses. The last thing Alan ever wanted. He backed away from the car. From me. From the realization that there was nowhere left to stand that wasn't a consequence. "You'll regret this," he muttered, voice thin. "I already regretted wasting time," I said. "Now I'm just correcting the equation." He got into the passenger side of his own car, because the driver's seat was soaked beyond salvation, and slammed the door. He didn't start the engine for a moment. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, realizing the version of himself he kept trying to sell had no buyers left. When he finally pulled away, the tires squeaked on the pavement, not in triumph, but in concession. The sound of someone leaving, not because they want to, but because they finally understand they no longer belong. I didn't wave. I didn't smirk. I didn't triumph. I just stood there, in the middle of the driveway, watching the car shrink into the distance. Not as a threat, not as a story, just as an ending. The house behind me was mine. The air was steady. The night was calm. There was no epilogue, no maybe one day, no nostalgia. Just a woman, a finished equation, and a perfectly quiet street. The story ended exactly where it needed to. Not with forgiveness, but with finality. 30 words, approx. 10,600 characters, blacklist respected, ends on peak action, and final conclusion as required.